All right, everyone, can you hear me? All right, let's get started. So today we're here to talk about how to make that transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, and there's going to be lots of strategies. So feel free to take notes. There's going to be questions I'll take at the end, and we have a surprise as well. So do stay till the end, and let's go. So in December 2015, my house had a fire. The condo I just bought, the building burnt down. I don't know. They never disclosed the reason, but someone was smoking something and then there was an explosion in the balcony and then a big chunk of the building literally burnt down. And I was displaced for 9 months, meaning I couldn't access the home, and it was a very, very difficult time of my life. It wasn't just a house fire. There was also, I had lost my visa. How many of you understand how hard it is to, yeah, the visa thing here is difficult. So I lost my visa because I lost the 2 jobs I had. I had a job with Upwork, which after Elance and Odesk merged, became Upwork, the freelancer marketplace. I got laid off. I gotten let go of another job that I was working, which I'd co-founded a marketing agency, which has now pivoted into a very successful SEO agency here in San Francisco. But it was a very, very difficult time because I had, I started out my career in entrepreneurship by accident without realizing I was an entrepreneur. And my book talks a lot about those stories of me living in Italy and Brazil and starting different businesses. When I moved to the US, for me, it was like, I need to get my dream job. I need to work 9 to 5. And I got that dream job, but when I worked it, it wasn't so much a dream job. Anyone relate to that? Yeah. So I wasn't not fulfilled. I ended up, going on some entrepreneurship boot camps and exploring, okay, in the US, entrepreneurship is cool. And I was like, how do I become an entrepreneur again? So all these things happened to me in 2015. And interestingly, throughout that year, I kept hearing my inner voice saying, Saleema, my intuition was like, Saleema, like you need to do something different. And I kept ignoring that inner voice. And I shut it up and I kept going and burying myself in work and being busy. And ultimately, when you don't take action, when you hear that inner voice, life will bring that to you. And so I ended up with this life quake with a series of incidents that happened to me. And it's a lot harder to get out when you're not proactive, when you're supposed to reinvent, and you just are reactive and you let things happen to you. So how it relates to our topic today is, if you're in your job and you're feeling something isn't aligned, then maybe go deeper into like why that feels misaligned. It doesn't mean you have to quit. It could be finding your intrinsic motivation. But for me, it was, just really doing that inner work. A lot of people think about it. Well, maybe I need to go start a business. Maybe I need to go do this. And if you understand like what is the real reason that's driving that, maybe there's a way to find motivation, but maybe it's time for a change. And being proactive about that change is very key. And we're going to talk about today why we shouldn't be looking at entrepreneurship and having a job is very, very different things. It's all about like, what do you want for your life and what's your vision? So we're living right now through this period of time. I call it the reinvention revolution. I call it this before COVID happened, and then it really happened as we, went through the pandemic, and a lot of people are like, I need to reinvent myself. And then the Great Resignation happened, and just going through the series of life quakes, a lot of us experienced a downtime. Anyone relate to that in the last few years, or a few downtimes? And then we go through this, turn that adversity into opportunity, or we just stay in a low place for a long time. But I like to turn that adversity or turn a life quake into an opportunity to reinvent ourselves into that next version of who we want to become. And so life is very much like this. Every time life is going great, you hit a curveball and then you have to reinvent, and then you go up again, and you just have to get used to that and embrace it. The more you embrace it, it's actually a lot easier to navigate those difficult times. So entrepreneurship, a lot of us think of it as, oh, it's about starting a business in my parents' garage, or building that unicorn, or going out and starting a business, incorporating a business and figuring that out. But entrepreneurship has evolved a lot. And I love what James Clear says, is that it's disguised as a business pursuit, but it's really a journey of personal transformation. It's a personal growth engine. And so a lot of people, especially if you're thinking of taking a sabbatical of sorts, like when the fire happened to me, I couldn't really enter the United States for a while. So I ended up going to India for a month. I did a lot of ashrams, meditation, yoga, spent time in Kerala. It was really cool. And then I went to Bali, went to Thailand, and I did a lot of work on myself. So if you think about, like, maybe you're feeling the itch for entrepreneurship, is it really to start a business, or is it you want to build a portfolio career with different revenue streams? Or do you just feel like it's time for a change and you want to take some time off, shut things down and go off, whether you travel, whether you just take time to read and reconnect with yourself and just do that personal growth? And there's lots of ways you can do that. I highly recommend getting professional help, therapy, coaching, all of that. I soaked it up and it's been really, really helpful for me. So a lot of you here, I want to understand who's in the room. So how many of you are like, I want to build a startup? Okay. How many of you are like, I want to be a portfolio career of sorts, like consulting, coaching, fractional executive? Okay, cool. So it's a bit of a mix, or it could be both. So yeah, the safest path is actually, I believe, and based on my research for my book, is hybridpreneurship. Hybridpreneurship is looking at it sort of like a blend. So like don't think about like, I want to build that next tech startup. Maybe you do, but the one path that's safest and less risky is hybridpreneurship. And this is where you're using your own expertise and your own skills and you're monetizing that, whether you do that to eventually fund or bootstrap your startup. That's what I did with my company, Ripple Impact. Didn't plan on that. It happened very organically. But, I was like, well, I have to do multiple things. And how do I do multiple things while monetizing and having the time to do all these different things? And so hybridpreneurship is a tool from my book that I created. And essentially, it's where you have to take care of yourself, right? You need to have our financial means covered. We need to make some profit, whether you are going to get a couple of contracts. Let's just say you want to quit your job. You're like, well, I need to secure a couple of contracts in order to make that transition. So while you're in your corporate job, you want to be building those relationships and really expanding your social capital, your network, so that you have the ability to secure some contracts that you can then consult. A lot of people turn their ex-employers into consulting work as well. And so once you have your profit covered, go for a couple of secure contracts that maybe they're retainers. There's many different models. Like a lot of people are now going into fractional executive work where they have retainers with different clients. Maybe you get paid $10,000 to $15,000 a month for each client, and you do like 15 to 20 hours a week. And you have that, don't do it month by month, but do it for like, at least 6 months. You have to figure out the right retainer that's going to work for you. That's a whole nother, another class. And then, or if you do consulting, just be careful not to trade your time for money. Be really careful about doing a lot of customized work, because you have to think about it. Is your goal to replace yourself and then farm out or hire other consultants? Or are you you really enjoy that work? And if you do, then chances are you're going to put in a lot of time, and you just don't want to get in a situation where you're just trading your time for money, because you can get burnt out that way. And you're like, well, why did I leave my job if I'm now in entrepreneurship, but I'm burning myself out again? So the other part of hybridpreneurship is you want to do something you're passionate about. So, for me, initially with a profit, I was doing some consulting. I was doing some speaking, I was doing some different things. I was teaching at Johns Hopkins, and I found a way to make the money I needed to make to live. And then passion, it's interesting because here it's like, well, a lot of us are like, we want to start a business or do something we're passionate about. And you totally can. In fact, I made a big pivot before COVID. I was doing a lot of facilitation work for organizations, and to be honest, I wasn't as passionate about it as working with entrepreneurs. And I didn't think that there was a way to make money working with entrepreneurs. And so I was like, but then, one of my advisors told me, Saleema, like, if you're not passionate about this, you're not going to be driven to really be successful at it. And so finding a way to incorporate your passion into whatever you do is going to be important, so that you really activate that intrinsic motivation within you. And some people are like, well, I'm going to do this fractional executive or consulting work, and then I'm going to start a nonprofit, or I'm going to do some passion projects. And there's different models. There's no one model. And then growth. This is about personal growth. This is about being curious. This is about doing things like Stanford lead, investing in yourself. The best investment that you can make is in yourself. And when you're in corporate, it's really hard, because it's like we're used to having professional development and all of that. But when you're an entrepreneur, you also really need to invest in yourself, because you don't get access to all those great professional development courses and programs. So like for me, I'm starting Harvard OPM, which is a program for entrepreneurs in May, and it's a huge investment, but I know that it's going to help me take my company to that level of skill I needed to go to. And I know that just seeing the power of investing in really good quality stuff, like really good quality programs, education, For entrepreneurs, peer networks are very, very key. We want to get to the best peer networks because it's all about your social capital when you're an entrepreneur. So personal growth, very, very important. If you're feeling like you're at the top of your network already, level up and be around people who are smarter than you, who you can learn from. And of course, give back, but you always want to be leveling up. And then the fourth part here is impact. So impact is about doing something that you can give back, right? Like whether it's like you want to speak to different communities, not necessarily with paid speaking, but you want to just give back. Like when I travel to other countries, I was in Colombia and Kenya and Salvador, a bunch of different countries last year. And I was like, I want to just speak and share some of my books to local entrepreneurs. Whether it's doing like this weekend, I'm speaking at this nonprofit gala, Sprouts chef training, culinary training for underprivileged Bay Area youth. And I'm just really passionate about what the founder's doing. So I'm speaking at her gala on Sunday. And it's about like making an impact and how can you really make an impact? And if it's not directly within your business model, because initially it can be kind of hard to figure out the impact part when you're trying to figure out the financial piece. Maybe there's a way to incorporate that. A lot of businesses do that, but you may want to also separate it and be like, I don't want it to be attached to my ego or to my business, and just whatever it is that you really want to do to make an impact. So, and here's a more detailed breakdown. This one you can take a picture of, but essentially it's also in my book, and it really breaks down the difference between being an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur within your organization, and a hybridpreneur. So how many of you are doing something within your corporate jobs entrepreneurial? Yeah, okay. A lot of leaders are. So the first exit strategy is to get really clear on your vision. And a lot of us think that we're clear. We think like, for me, it's like, I want to help women entrepreneurs. And it can be clear, but it's not really articulate. It's not really precise. The precision piece needs to be there. And the business coach in my company, Anna, she always talks about like entrepreneurs think that they're clear when they come and work with my company, and they're not actually clear enough. That leads to predictability, and it's the precision that leads to that predictability. And so precision meaning that give us more features, give us more details, and be more curious. Like what type of women entrepreneurs do you want to help? For us, it's like, okay, we have to get really clear. We were very broad when we first started my company. We were like, let's help all these entrepreneurs. We realized, well, which are the ones that we can help the most, the ones that will get the most value, the ones that will be our evangelists, the ones that will refer us more business, the ones that, will actually be success stories. And it was actually, right now we're working with a lot of transitioning women executives and as well as entrepreneurs who already have reached a certain level. So it's quite interesting how we think we're clear, we're not actually that clear. And so working with a business coach, working with somebody who can help you get that clarity is very important, especially if you're in your corporate job and your headspace. It can be like, it's really hard to get to that level of clarity because you have all these ideas and you're like, how do I make sense of all these ideas? Talking to someone as a sounding board is going to be really important. And as you're going through that process of coming up with your vision, really take a look at what makes you unique and like what are your skills? What are your passions? What are your values? What kind of experience do you bring? And so a lot of times it's like, well, instead of thinking about what's the next problem I can solve, think about yourself, because at the end of the day, it's about your personal vision first for yourself. So why are you even going into entrepreneurship? And really thinking about, I ask a lot of our prospects at my company, how much time do you want to spend working with? How do you want to spend that time? Like break it up percentage, like how much time speaking, how much time consulting, how much time coaching. Break it up into living. Getting very specific is going to be very, very key. Second, how much money do you want to make? A lot of times we're unclear. Like generally, most of the people that I work with, like, I want to between 300 to 500,000. They're like, I want to make enough money to be comfortable. And so yeah, there's lots of different models out there, but being really clear on what you really want for yourself will help you dictate, well, your business vision, but also like the business model essentially. So, and that being said, there's, you have to have a vision statement for yourself as well as your business. And, for example, for me, my personal focus is for me to enjoy my life, build great relationships with people, build a family, and travel to new places. I love traveling. And for business, my business focus, I want to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses and themselves, because at the end of the day, it's not just about the business or the idea, it's the founder that will take it to success. And so that they actually feel like they're accomplishing their purpose. So purpose is huge, and living a comfortable life. And now I'd actually love for you to think about, what is your vision for yourself? and your business, and share it with the person next to you. I'm going to give you 1 minute for each. So 1 minute for one person to share, and then 1 minute for the other person to share. And I'd love for you to just interact and share your vision for yourself and your business. All right. So when you're working on your vision, it's important to, a lot of times we're like, I want this, but, or like, you know, I really want to do this, but, and we, in our inner critic or whatever it is inside of us is stopping us. And so it's important to think about, well, what are your obstacles to achieving that vision, and list those obstacles down. And then you want to think about, well, what are strategies that you can implement to overcome your obstacles? And who's taking decision making here at Stanford? So think about how you can think about different scenarios and what are different strategies you can come up with. And then what's the first action you can take? It's about, what is that next step? Don't overthink, don't think too far into the future, but what's that first next practical step you can take to overcome that? So yeah, this is a great framework to use. All right, the second strategy that I'm going to share with you today, we have 10, is to identify your target audience. Usually when we go into entrepreneurship, and done this myself many times, we want to help everyone. We're like, well, I can help all these people. And this happens when I have my company is basically a business accelerator, helping corporate exiters turn into a business. And they're like, I want to help everyone, or, have a busyness addiction expert you're going to see. And there's different types of people that we help, and they're like, well, I can help a lot of different people. And we're like, well, there's different types of people, sure, but who's going to be the person that you can, the audience that you can make the most impact on, the ones that are going to be your biggest fans, your biggest evangelists, the ones that are going to be most successful. It's not about, we're often thinking in scarcity mindset when we start a business. We're like, well, we need to get customers. And are those customers going to be ideal customers for you? Are they going to be happy customers? You might end up spending a lot of time putting out fires or putting out probably, just if they're not happy. So you have to really think about who's your target audience. And there's different ways of doing that. And I would recommend doing your market research and doing some interviews with different types of, different segments within your target market and get really clear. And know that it's not going to be perfect right off the bat. You're going to have some good experiences. You're going to have some bad experiences. And then you're going to have to be constantly pivoting and iterating and figuring out your audience will evolve. The market's changing constantly. So you just have to be constantly on top of, how your audience is evolving. As you evolve too, as you go through lead, as you go through different programs and you grow yourself, you're going to attract different types of people into your life. So for example, my company, we work with a lot of authors, speakers, consultants, coaches, corporate exiters, people who want to get on boards, and they want to be thought leaders, they want to be recognized authorities, they want to be known, and they want to grow their audience. And they don't have the roadmap, they don't know the strategy, they don't have the how, and they don't have a team that's working all together. They're usually working with a lot of different vendors and freelancers, and they're just trying to put it all together, and it's not working. And so we're all about helping them get to their actual outcomes. And we had to get really clear. We were like, well, maybe we'll work with, I really was passionate about founders. I'm like, I want to help founders. I want to help early stage entrepreneurs. We realized that wasn't necessarily some of those, yes. If they have thought leadership, if they have enough experience to deliver on a great product, sure. But we were a little bit too broad before, and that caused a lot of problems when we grew very fast, but we didn't have everything, we didn't have all the operations in place, and we didn't have enough clarity on our target audience. And so it can actually hurt you more than help you if you don't do that work up front and then constantly evaluate. It's important to have your target audience clear because you want to achieve product market fit. And especially if you're going the thought leadership route, message market fit, you want to make sure that you're able to make those customers really happy. You want to make sure that you can get more and more business and referrals. Think about a referral tree from your initial customer base. You want to make your sales process efficient. You don't want to have to constantly having to make all these custom proposals. Now you have to do all this, you spend all this time doing all these custom proposals and custom projects, and it just becomes really hard to repeat and to scale. Then you also want to generate enough market demand. So if you're a bit too broad, then your message is not going to be specific, and people are not going to feel like, wow, this company or this person is really helping me with these pain points I have. It's just too broad. So, and then obviously for customer retention, you want to make sure that you retain your customers, especially for in consulting or services, then long-term. And product market fit is important because you want to make sure you align with the market needs. You want to be efficient with your resources, right? If you have a team, you want to make sure they're able to operate with you without you eventually. And if you're a CEO, or your goal is to replace yourself, and the goal is to get out of the weeds and out of operations. If you're a visionary like myself, that's constantly full of ideas and you want to build something and then move on to the next thing, then you have to find a way to replace yourself. And that's why the efficiency and resources is key. And it all starts with having the clarity with the business model and the target audience. You want to be able to scale. So yeah, repeatability is important. And at that point, some of us builders and creators, we get kind of bored. We're like, well, we don't want to deal with that. We want to go move on to our next thing. And so having that foundation is going to be very key. And then you also want to be able to, make better decisions, and having clarity on the audience will help with that. Next strategy, number 3, is to develop your sweet spot. And we learned, actually, some of us learned throughout this conference that we need to develop our unique point of view. And essentially there's other words for it, your thought leadership, there's, your unique angle, and really figure out what is your sweet spot. What is that, like Kawasaki talks about how it's not about the business idea. It's about like how you and your uniqueness, how can you bring that to the business idea? And as a founder, you're trying to derive that, to success. It's going to take, what is it about you that's unique? I have a couple of investor meetings today and I'm like, okay, I'm not actively raising, but I have to really focus on like, what is it that I bring that's unique? And the investor will be most interested in that plus the business idea, but it's really important that you know your uniqueness and your sweet spot. So actually, if you're still in your corporate job, think about it as you don't need to wait till you're out of corporate to start thinking about this. You should already be thinking about how to develop your sweet spot. How do you actually develop your own unique, whether it's a framework, a methodology? Think about your corporate job as a lab where you can test different ideas and you're getting paid to test them. So especially if you're an entrepreneur, use that as an opportunity to build a really great case study. And then you can context switch that. When you go into entrepreneurship, you already have some proof or some traction within them. So when you're thinking about, well, what's my sweet spot? This is another tool from my book. Really think about, map it out. And, I studied economics, so you're going to see a lot of these 2x2 frameworks. But essentially, think about what do you really excel at? What are something that what are the things that you're really, really, really good at? And then also, because to really expand our self-awareness, what are things that other people praise you for? They're like, well, you're really good at this thing. Or, and just ask people, like, what do you think I'm really good at? Actually, how I started my current company, because I was in the design thinking space before. I used to do a lot of design thinking workshops around the world before COVID. And when COVID happened, a lot of that got canceled, and I didn't enjoy doing it on Miro boards and doing all the virtual stuff. So my assistant, when I was building my personal brand, when I was becoming an author, my assistant in Colombia, actually, which is me and a very small team, my assistant, I was like, can you interview some of my friends and my colleagues and ask them these questions? What is Saleema good at? What would you be willing to buy or invest in from her? Like, what are her best skills? And interestingly, they're like, oh, like marketing, branding, networking, and all these things. I was like, what about design thinking and innovation? Like, that's what I wanted to be known for. And interestingly, the feedback we got was very, very different. And so that helped that she's like, well, these are the things that we could sell. And I was like, how are you going to sell all these things that I can't do on my own, like graphic design related stuff or brand assets? And I was freaking out because it can be a control freak when you're a founder. It's a normal thing. You want to do it all yourself. But essentially, it brought a lot of clarity, getting that external feedback as to what I'm really good at and what we could sell and develop a business model around. Third thing, what do you really love doing? What's the thing that really drives you? And that's also very important because you might get some passions out of there. And what are the things that you're open to testing? And these are your ideas. These are the, all these ideas, the things that you think about, whether you're in the shower, you're going for a walk, when you just take a break and put those ideas down. And you might be able to identify, draw it or mirror board it, whatever gets you most creative. And you might be able to identify what is your sweet spot. You can also use this tool, the Johari window. I won't go into it too deeply. Anyone know the Johari window? Great way to get, basically, what do you know about yourself and what other people know about you? What do you not know about yourself, but other people know about you? And then what are things that you know about yourself that you don't share with other people? And then what do you not know about yourself and nobody else knows about you? And that's interesting because that unknown area is what we, especially if you're driven to entrepreneurship, there's probably something that needs to be developed there that you're not aware of. All right, and this is another tool in my book that I really like. I use, it's basically, anyone remember that TikTok video with that quesadilla hack during COVID? You flip it, you put the different ingredients on each corner and then you like flip it into like almost like a pizza shape. That went viral during the pandemic. And the reason is it was unique, it was non-obvious. So you have to think about like, how is your message or how is your product or whatever you yourself, how are you different than everything else out there. It doesn't have to be a groundbreaking idea. It's often today how you package things. Seth Godin, he talks about we don't need just new ideas, we need original combinations of existing ideas. And so really think about how you can reach that non-obvious quarter there. And just briefly, so the cheese quesadilla, it's something that's highly desired, but it's not that different. There's lots of cheese quesadillas out there. So it's ordinary. And then dull is a burnt quesadilla. It's not desired and it's not different. Nobody wants a burnt quesadilla. And then odd or weird is like having an onion, garlic, and fruit quesadilla, which is different, but it's not desired. So you don't want to be in any of those three spaces. You want to be within the non-obvious quadrant. The fourth strategy is you want to create your business model. And again, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get there, but essentially you can start somewhere. Within my company, we have a business coach that basically helps just get to that first step so that you focus on one audience, one ideal client profile, and one revenue stream. And just focus is key. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, we're not focused, including myself. So I have fractional executives that hold me down and say, Saleema, focus. And it's important to focus here because a lot of times we're shifting and we're like, well, I want to do this, I want to do that. And so having a clear business model, you don't need a long business plan. You just need a way to go to market and start selling and to, repeat that until you can, get to a point where you can then expand. And really think about how you can build a product roadmap for you. So I don't know, we had a bunch of drawing workshops throughout this conference, but really take a board or a mirror board or whatever and draw like, what is your product roadmap? All the different things, all your ideas, put them on a roadmap, maybe 3 to 5 years. How are you going to put them out? Like, for example, some of you are like, well, I want to start a podcast, but what's the purpose of that? And how is it going to be successful? If you don't have an audience yet, maybe the strategy is to get on other people's podcasts to build your audience, your positioning, and maybe the podcast you can launch 3 years from now. So think about the order, how you're going to launch all these different products, because a lot of times you have to think about it really strategically, because a lot of times you're doing things out of order, and that also is why a lot of entrepreneurs fail, is we do too much and we're not focused, and then we don't do things at the right time. And here are some insights from Alex Osterwalder. I don't know if you can hear it. I interviewed him for my book. He was one of my initial interviews. I reached out to him, and he gave me some really great insights on how do you get to a scalable business model. And he talked a lot about, I guess you can't turn it up, but essentially he talked a lot about how you want to find the when you're looking at a business problem, you want to think about the constants and the variables. So think about what are the problems that are constant, and then what are the ones that are variable. And then once you gather all the problems that are constant, build your model around that. And then all the variables can be add-ons. So think about it, like, let's look at it more conceptually. So the 80-20 rule is an example of that. So think about your product, your idea as a pizza. And then you can have all these other ingredients that are the customizations that you can add to that, or the features to your product. But what is the main core product? So for us at my company, we have a business accelerator, right? Like, we have a program, follows a very specific framework. We help them with their business model. We help these entrepreneurs build their brands. We help them with their marketing strategy. We transform their LinkedIn. We help grow their audience. And then we help support on some of the sales. And so essentially, it's interesting because that's the framework, but the journey, what makes us unique is how we customize the journey depending on the goals of the entrepreneur. So the journey, the customization, the little add-ons, the little pieces of it are essentially the toppings of the pizza. So think about your business model that way. Again, if you want to scale, or you want to get to a point, even if you're not thinking of scaling, but you want to make a decent amount of money, you want to think about how can you use this 80-20 rule in terms of how you're thinking about your business model. Exit strategy number 5 is building your personal brand. A lot of times we're like, I'm going to wait till I quit my job and then I'm going to focus on building my brand. Start building your brand while you're in corporate, especially if you can get past any ethics or, conflict of interest issues, or if you're in transition, especially if you're in transition between jobs. This is the best time where you are free and you can, build your personal brand. It doesn't mean you have to say you're a business. It's just about your thought leadership. Be yourself, share your thought leadership. Test some different things. Don't feel like you have to get it perfect. You have to kind of see how the market responds to your content. So, for example, I started talking a lot about design thinking and leadership and DEI and all these different topics years ago on LinkedIn. And I was like, I'm not getting that many responses. And then as soon as I started understanding the market wanted to hear more about, like, how did I get my TED Talk? How did I get the speaking engagement? How did I do this? And I was like, oh, okay, so the market's not interested in what I thought they were interested in. They're interested in something else. And I started talking about different things. And then all of a sudden my content started going viral, and I was like, okay, very important. And as you build your personal brand, really think about, it's not about how you feel about your brand. It's not about what you put out there, which is your marketing. It's about, as Jeff Bezos says, it's about what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So people will feel a certain way. They're going to judge you. People still judge books by their cover, and they're going to have a certain feeling when they look at your brand. And it's important that you do your brand well, and not just visually, but in terms of your messaging. You want consistency. We can do a whole workshop on branding, but essentially building your personal brand is important. A lot of people, especially if you're in corporate, you might be used to representing another company. A lot of our clients that come to us at my company, they're like, oh, I feel so much about getting out there and being a personal brand. If you're going the portfolio career route, you definitely need this. If you want to speak, you want to be an authority, you want to be a thought leader, you want to be an author, you want to get on corporate boards, whatever it is, personal branding is the way to go. There are some people who are like, well, I want to do consulting and I want to run a consulting firm. I want to have other consultants. Consulting firm, you could have a company brand, that's fine, but you still need to have that personal branding element of your voice, your thought leadership, all of that, especially if you're the face of the company. Your small consulting firm is not going to be known unless you're known first. And so this is key. And no matter what you do, and I was a person that had many businesses and I was always behind the scenes and I didn't want to get out there. And there's no documentation of that now. Like there's nothing from the first 10 years of my career. There's nothing about the businesses that I built. I just didn't post anything. I was running things and doing things, but I didn't really know about this. I didn't believe in it. I didn't know much about it. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to be known myself. I want the business to be known. And a lot of those businesses are not around anymore, or they've pivoted to something else, or they've Elance, that's merged and became Upwork. And now all that stuff, it's just, yeah, I should have really, if I could go back in time, I would have totally leveraged the fact that I was doing a lot of speaking and pitching Elance and ODATs back at opening WeWork locations in DC. And I was just so focused internally that I didn't think about how could I really use that externally and build a brand. So lots of lessons learned from my own experiences. But yeah, this is an example of someone who pivoted out of corporate and she started her own business, one of our earlier clients. She came to us, she's like doing all this coaching, but it's not scalable, and I want to do more speaking because that speaking is what energizes me. I'm like, well, let's figure out what do you want, and then let's design an experience that gets you a journey that gets you what you want. And I was like, well, if you want to speak, you're going to need a book. If you really want to do a lot of speaking and get paid for it, you need a book. It's the best proof of expertise. She's like, well, that's been on my bucket list for life, but well, let's do a working book cover for you now. You don't have to have the book published. It's about having a book in progress and market that book for 2 years. That's what I did. Accidentally, I took very long to finish my book, and a lot of the success was because I took so long. It was frustrating, but I managed. It actually led to a lot of building my platform. And so similarly, we're like, hey, just build a working book cover. Invite people into your journey. Invite people that want to be part of the journey of behind the scenes, what it takes to start this book and take it to fruition. A lot of people are like, well, I'm going to write a book and I'm not going to tell anyone until it's done, and then I'm going to market it. And I'm like, nope. If you're not known, terrible strategy. And now she's been speaking at a lot of different companies, and she has her book published, and she's happy and she's successful, and her business has grown by 50% each year. Another example, one of our clients from 3 years ago, actually, she's been working with us for a while, Peggy Sullivan. She came to us, she had just published a book on happiness is your responsibility. I told her, hey, that's not very non-obvious, it's kind of obvious. I taught her a lot about how do you build your thought leadership, and then she did more research, really leveled up her thought leadership, got published into a lot of different outlets, and she's in the process right now of publishing her book that we actually helped her with on Beyond Busyness, which is essentially how do you get over busyness addiction, because she's like, there's a lot of people who are addicted to busyness. I didn't realize I was addicted to it myself when I read her book. And it's amazing because she has really grown, and she did 28 speaking engagements last year. She's really happy. She's doing a lot of different cool stuff. And we actually were just at Harvard Business School a few weeks ago in February. Amy Edmondson endorsed her book, and we were like, well, let's have lunch together. And she's like, sure. And it's just a great way when you're building your brand. You can, it's the way that I reached out to Alex Osterwalder. I didn't really have much of a brand back then, but I was like, let me go to his website and speaking requests, and they're like, hey, I want to interview you. Can I do an interview for my book? And then his assistant reached out, and boom. So having the personal brand is really great because it helps you have that social proof of the positioning. to get access to certain people that you may not otherwise be able to access. Of course, she had a great media kit and email footer and all these other things that helped. And she followed up many times with Amy, but myself included, I got lots of great endorsements for my book, and it's about pitching. But when you pitch, you sometimes only have 1 or 2 shots, and you want to make sure that you have a strong brand. All right, number 6 is you want to be helpful and give value to other people. Giving is the best sales strategy today. Giving is the best strategy to really build solid relationships with other people. A lot of us learned that today, or at this conference, actually, some of the speakers have talked about the importance of giving value. Figure out how you can be helpful. Where can you volunteer? Where can you just be helpful? A lot of the best connections I've made have been through volunteering or just giving value to people. You know, it's incredible. My book has a chapter on how you can give value and sort that value, like sort those different things that you do. I joined a bunch of advisory boards when I was going through my own tool process, my own reinvention. It's important to just take some time to think about how can you be helpful to somebody. And just with that mindset as an entrepreneur in business, you just want to always be thinking about how can you serve and help other people. For example, like how I became a speaker, I had no plans to become a speaker, no idea I'd actually do this. I was a person that was shy, person that was nervous, person that would avoid debating during grad school. And all of a sudden, I was being helpful to a founder of a Women in Tech conference and a DEI Women in Tech conference that was launching in the DC area. And I don't know, I found her on LinkedIn. I was like, how can I be helpful? I just felt like I really wanted to help. I think when sometimes we're in that process of what we're a bit lost, I was just like, well, I was just trying to help a lot of people. And next thing you know, I connected her to my network in DC. And all of a sudden she's like, Saleema, like, I want to give you a keynote, a workshop, and a booth. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I have to order all this swag. And now I have to figure out what I'm going to talk about. And I was like, I was almost going to say no. And then my gut was like, Saleema, just take it. It was my first keynote on a stage. And I was nervous and the confidence monitor was not working. And so at that time I was very reliant on my script. And all of a sudden I spoke, and it wasn't what I never thought I would do this again. I'll do it one time. She asked me to. And then that led to like 50 more engagements, including paid engagements. I had like Fannie Mae and all these different companies reach out from that audience. So like, can you speak at our, inclusive innovation event? Can you do this, this, this? And all these different opportunities came from one speaking engagement. And that's a whole nother talk on like, how do you do a referable speech, deliver a referable speech that will lead to lots of stage side leads that will book you for the next event. But I had no idea that would launch one of my streams or paths as a speaker. Also, I ended up that same year speaking at, I was in Liberia. I spoke with Ariana Huffington at a conference. I was, at another thing in Indiana. I was at the government in Morocco. Like I was just all over the place speaking. Sometimes I was just doing it because I wanted to, like Morocco and Liberia. I did it with the World Bank, but I also was like, well, I'm going to take that World Bank gig if you let me also do a workshop for the local entrepreneurs. And so I did that. And then you see on the left there, and then, on the bottom left, that's Morocco. It's like, well, I'm going on vacation in Morocco. Let me try to build a relationship with, the local, it's a local co-working space. Someone made a connection for me, and I just did a workshop pro bono. And it was really cool how many connections came out of that, and just, just being helpful. And yeah, it goes a really long way. I'm actually going to Morocco in a couple of weeks. And so I can reconnect, and, it's all about relationships when you're an entrepreneur. And yeah, Ariana was great. That came from another connection. It was like, hey, we'll fly you to Brussels. And I have to negotiate, like, will you fly my team to Brussels for this conference, for this association conference for HR managers at international organizations? And they're like, well, you get to interview Ariana Huffington on stage. And actually doing that interview was great because she, ended up happening during COVID in 2020. So I didn't go to Brussels, but essentially she mentioned my book, and that ended up becoming an endorsement for my book. And then I used that one endorsement for Ariana to get Seth Godin, Adam Grant, Dan Pink, and all these others. So it's important when you're helpful, you can get really great opportunities like that. Exit strategy number 7, you want to go to market. Don't think so hard. A lot of us get stuck in our heads, especially if you're like been in corporate for a while, you're used to perfection over progress, and you want to just get out there. Sure, you want to be strategic about it, but you also don't want to stay in your head for too long, because that doesn't get you anywhere. And one way to do that is start building relationships. So I recommend going on what I call, it's in my TEDx talk, a 100 coffee challenge. Talk to lots of people, nourish your existing network, nurture them, also build new relationships, people that are outside of your, people that you wouldn't typically talk to. people that you may, maybe it's part of your target market research. Just really focus on building relationships, create a system. There's a tool that I have, I'm happy to share later, but essentially it's like a spreadsheet where you can follow up and set up like these relationships and these copies strategically. But the follow-up is very important as well. Even if you have a standard email follow-up that you can customize, have a system in place for the follow-up. So that's going to be important with the right links or whatever you want to share. I actually have a masterclass. I gave it, you may have heard, I don't know if any of you were in the LinkedIn event that I did last year. Yeah. So I gave away a lot of information on how do you leverage LinkedIn to grow your platform and your business, or even if it's not a business, to grow your influence. And I did it before Me2We last year, and there's lots of valuable insights. I think that's a link to the recording. LinkedIn has a lot of great content scoring. The algorithm's constantly changing, so you want to be on top of how you're using LinkedIn, because it's not just about posting content. Today it's about commenting. It's about knowing how the algorithm works so that you can get as many points as possible, so your posts can go far. But there's a lot on LinkedIn. That's a whole nother course of its own that I have. But yeah, I just want to say that LinkedIn is your best tool right now, so use it. And, really thinking about when you go to market, you don't have to do anything robust as this, but like, how can you put together a marketing strategy in terms of the things that you're going to do? So for example, I have this thought leadership content calendar, one of my fractional executives put together for me. And he was like, Saleema, like think about, all the different types of content that you can put out there based on the topics, based on our product roadmap, and just execute on it. Again, progress over perfection is when going to market. I see a lot of you posting, by the way, about this event on Me2We, so that's great. Just putting a picture up, putting something out. Avoid reposting other people's stuff. You're only going to get to 1% of your network, so do the work to create your own posts. And I actually have a surprise guest speaker who, when I was on the plane on Sunday, I got the Wi-Fi and I was like texting, and then one of my clients was like, "Hey, like, can I come see you speak?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, I have you as a case study in my talk." And so Glenn Block is actually here today, and I actually would love for him to. Okay.
I'm loud, it's easy. Great to be here with all of you. First, I just want to congratulate you for pursuing your executive education. You're never too old to go back to school. I went back and got my executive MBA at Seattle U a couple of years ago, and that's been fantastic. So definitely recommend, as Saleema was saying, constantly investing in yourself. That is something that I've done throughout my career, and it has continually paid off. So as Saleema said, I have about 30 years in tech, worked for about 10 years at Microsoft. I've been in big companies, small companies, startups. One did extremely well, which is this company Auth0 that my friend was the CEO, and they went off and got acquired for $6.5 billion. I was an early advisor and employee for them. So I've seen a lot. It's really interesting hearing her story, talking about hybridpreneurship, because that's very much been my journey. One thing I'll say is, like, we evolve, we change, and accept those evolutions as they happen, because sometimes what you think you want to do today, you might find 5 years from now you want to do something completely different, and that's actually okay. So at the time when I was at Auth0, here I'm working with my friend who's the CEO who built this crazy successful startup, and I saw what it took, and I'm like, I should do this. Like, that's what I want to do. And when I finally decided I wanted to go off on my own, that is not what I wanted to do, because one, it was a huge toll. I mean, Eugenio, who's the CEO, who's now he's the COO of Okta, who acquired Auth0. It was just a massive time commitment. And I just was like, that's not what I want. I don't want to be constantly on the road. I don't want to be up all night. I mean, he made a huge amount of money, so there certainly was the financial aspect to it. So I think knowing yourself, that's the first tip I would say. Really learn to know yourself, and I think Saleema was talking a lot about that. So when I decided to finally go off on my own after being an executive in a startup, I decided, things didn't work out. I'm ready to do something different. Taking that time to reflect was so important. Actually, it was during that time of reflection that I met Saleema. But I took, one of the things I did was really think about what gives me life and what takes away. from life, in terms of, what are the things that drive me and what are the things that tax me? And my decision to go off on my own was not so much motivated by money. I mean, fortunately, I did pretty well and was in a pretty good place. It was more about flexibility. And it was also more about, so I have ADHD. I didn't learn that until very late in life. And it explains a lot because I like to work on like 10 different things. And one of the things I realized is because of how I'm wired, I really want variety. And because I wasn't finding that variety in my corp job, I would do a lot of work outside of work to fill that. So one of the things that I thought about when I went off on my own was, what if I could actually build out a life that brings that flexibility and that variety into what I do day to day? And that will also then free me up to do other things in that other time. So I got really into the outdoors. I got really into rock climbing, mountaineering, all kinds of things like that, that suddenly were now much more possible when I decided to really go off on my own. The other thing is when you decide to go off, I think about two big things, especially because of my background in tech and everything. There's like, do I want to go and do like create a product, which is one option, and that's what my former CEO did, or do I want to like create like a service-based company or market my expertise? And I decided, again, based on all the stresses I had seen in trying to like build out startups, that I really wanted to go for the second category, which is, I want to find something that I can do what I enjoy. I'm really banking on the 30 years of experience I have, including like 10 years at Microsoft, that's going to be valuable to companies. And I really did go in initially on the fractional CPO route, which I've been doing for my first year. So really working with companies, advising them on product strategy. But there's also the passion angle. So, and this is something I'll talk about too. So like, although I started off on fractional CPO, that was just like a start for me. That isn't really the destination. I'm really passionate about trying to change our industry and how we build products to build them in a more inclusive way. There's a lot of problems we've seen with AI, with inequitable algorithms, with products that just use labels that are offensive and exclude people from other backgrounds, especially from underrepresented groups. Talking about branding, the time I was at Microsoft, I was caring more and more about the inequities that I saw in tech. And so for me, it's like this idea of now being able to be off on my own and really go after something that I'm passionate about. That is part of what the flexibility of having my own business is bringing me. But it's not going to get there right away. And it's an uphill battle. And I wouldn't say it's an uphill battle. I'd say I'm carving out a space that there's not a lot of people doing what I'm trying to do in terms of bringing to companies. So having something that's like my bread and butter that I can fall back to, which is really where the fractional CPO role comes in. And then gradually, while I'm working on that, I'm using the rest of the time to really work on carving out this new business. And so my work with Saleema and Ripple has been completely about that. We haven't focused that much on the fractional CPO side of things. And then because of my ADHD, I'm also a co-founder for a home coffee roaster. That was also very organic. It was not planned. It's my first consumer product. I think the whole thing is just, being curious, as Saleema said, being open to new experiences, trying them out. When you go off on your own, it's going to be a journey. Give yourself grace, right? You're gonna bump your head against the wall. It's not going to work out right away. One big thing I would say too, just in terms of tips, if you go off on your own, come up with a runway. Think about what is your runway. When I went off, I gave myself a year. Said I'm going to go off for a year. If at the end of the year I'm not finding a way to make this work, well, I'll go do a startup or go back to corp. But the nice thing about that is once I had that year timeline, it freed me up. Because now I could just get to work focusing on, trying to learn and figure out how I'm going to make my way. And then I knew that, you know, if 8 months went by, for example, and I saw things weren't working out, then I was gonna have to start to think about doing something different. Fortunately, my first year went really well. Then the tech industry got slammed and, you know, everybody's getting laid off, as we all know. So it's definitely been a trying time recently, but I am now really starting to make headway on the thing that is my vision of really focusing on this, how to help companies build their products in a more equitable way, and that I'm really excited about. So, yeah, thank you all.
So yeah, Glenn, interestingly, thanks to Me2We, I was in San Francisco and last year, and I was like, coming to Me2We for this conference, let's grab coffee. And then I had no idea that we would ever work together, but it was just like, he had no positioning at that time that he was gonna do all this stuff. And then we're like, let's meet virtually then. And we met virtually. And the next thing you know, we're like working together. So again, 100 coffee challenge, be out there, meet people. LinkedIn, I think we were connected on LinkedIn. I don't know how, not through a introduction or anything.
No, I think we were just gonna.
Yeah. So again, use LinkedIn. LinkedIn's powerful. And there's a way to do the thing that you're passionate about. Like, I love helping people like Glenn who are trying to really make their purpose or their impact and build great things. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm finally living the dream life after a lot of struggles along the way, which you'll read about in my book. And so this is a lot of what my team put together, is like his positioning, his branding, his strategy, all of that. And so, yeah, check out his profile, follow him on LinkedIn. All right, next strategy is you want to test, iterate, super niche, and pivot. So there's some resources I can share on that if you'd like, on how you do the super niching and pivoting, but essentially you really want to, or call it like micro niche, you really want to get clear on your niche. A lot of us like you're too broad. We want to, test a bit. We want to iterate, change up things. You want to constantly be in that design thinking mode. A lot of us take in design thinking. So go through the design thinking process or something similar along that where you're iterating. Make a pivot when you need to. The market is changing so fast today. I'm in the process of my own pivot at my company. We're constantly needing to pivot. So that's very important to be in that mindset. If something's working right now, it's probably not going to work for a very long time that way. So milk that for a bit, but make sure you're already thinking about your next strategy, how you're going to evolve. And this is just a framework on pivoting. There's different types of pivoting whether you're changing up your products and services or your entire business strategy or your marketing strategy or even the customers that you're working with. And so this is another tool. It's not mine, but essentially, yeah, it's a great way to kind of think about pivoting. This is one of my tools on feedback matrix. Getting feedback is very important. What worked for me, it was actually from my book, essentially from a few years ago. I think I published my book when my company was still in its infant stages, but essentially we were beta testing the business accelerator program that we were working with all these different entrepreneurs. And we had to really think about like what worked, what didn't work, and then what were the questions people were having, what were a lot of the same questions that kept coming up, and what are some of the ideas that we want to think about for the future in our product roadmap. So strategy number 9, you want to build a path to predictable revenue. A lot of times we're like, I'm going to exit, I'm going to have this one client and I'm going to, do this, because a lot of people actually get, and I've done this myself, we get into this consulting world and we're like, I got this consulting gig. And then I'm not going to think about marketing. I'm not going to think about branding and pipeline and all of that because I'm focused on this consulting gig. And then after that consulting gig is over, everything's dried up and you're like, what am I going to do next? And you end up in this feast and famine cycle. Anyone familiar with this?
We're getting this right now.
Yeah. So a lot of us know this. 2023, if you're an entrepreneur, probably a lot of us had difficult times and there was a lot of famine going on because the market was changing and it was just crazy. 2022 was a great year. But essentially, yeah, lots of new clients come in and then you start delivering and focusing on all these clients. They're like, let's focus on these clients. I have to help them out. And then you invoice them and now you're like, well, what's next? And so it's important to do all those other strategies, having a solid model, having predictable path is important so that you're not just throwing darts everywhere and hope, because hope is not a strategy. And you want to make sure that it's not about just, getting new clients and delivering, but you have a long-term pipeline. And that's why the positioning, the branding, the marketing, growing your LinkedIn, all of that is going to be important. Like Glenn said, what you're doing now might not be the thing that you're doing in the next 5 years. Maybe you'll have solved that problem. Maybe you'll have gone through an acquisition. Maybe you'll have a drastic life change. Maybe you just want to live on the beach and do something else. And you have to think about, well, how can I build something that through your personal brand, you take that through the rest of your career in life. Those people will be your network. They'll follow you. they'll be there to support you. And so don't get too caught up in just, attaching your identity to your business. A lot of us founders tend to do that in the early stages. Some strategies to overcome that famine and stay within the feast mode is, be careful about trading time for money. It's easy to do that when you leave corporate, but just make sure you're you're working on your business just as much as you're working within your business. Keep building that pipeline, those relationships. Make sure that you set up a system where you're constantly, even if it's just a couple hours, like a few hours a week, where you're just working on those relationships and having coffee with people. And then maintain laser focus, as I mentioned earlier. Strategy number 10 is investing in your solidarity squad. So this is your support group, your support network, your circle of 5, whatever you want to call it, or personal board of directors. We hear that a lot. The people that are going to be there long-term and support you, that you really can count on, that you trust, that are qualified to give you advice. Another thing is qualified advice. And people that you can really trust, whether they're, could be friends, family, could also be advisors, colleagues. Try to keep it fairly small, like maybe the small circle, the inner circle, and then you can have other people for certain things. But essentially, you want to be really good about having a good squad, a good set of people that you can rely on. You may not be ready to build a board yet, but your informal board will be these people. One thing I really learned about through one of my colleagues who did the Harvard OPM program. I haven't even started the program yet, but I've already been getting a lot of the returns because of the great network. They're all YPO members, young professional or young president's organization members. So they're all like, they're already like 10 million above in their the revenue. Was like, hey, like my business is not 10 million in revenue and I'm going to do this Harvard program and I feel a little bit intimidated. He's like, well, you've got a lot of social capital. You've got a lot of emotional capital, like the resilience that I have, the ability to take things, to pivot instead of failing, to figure out how can I feel smart, but like really get to success, make sure I don't let any ship fail. The resilience I have, that's another life story. My mom passed away when I was 16 and I've like gone through a lot of different changes, the stories in my book, but essentially I've built a lot of that emotional capital, that resilience and that courage. And so that's very important. Don't underestimate the power of emotional capital, especially if you're going into entrepreneurship. Financial capital, we usually tend to focus on this in the early stages because we're like, okay, we need to, get our runway sorted. We need to make sure that we make enough money. And we often heads down focus on that. A lot of scarcity mindset tends to happen before our first $1 million. And you really want to, financial capital is very important, but you also don't underestimate the value of the other types of capital. Emotional, intellectual capital is like your brain, essentially, your thought leadership, your uniqueness, your methodology, your framework, whatever it is, your constant investment in yourself, your personal growth, your intellectual growth. All of that very important. And then your social capital, that's the one that I think is probably the most important because the social capital will allow you to get access to whether it's investors, get access to people that may rescue or save your business someday. They're people that will help you take you to the next level, like the social capital or people that will become your customers. There's so much within social capital and we tend to underestimate that and not focus on that enough. So I really love the way that he looked at capital in these different ways, and I wanted to share that because we often think about capital on the financial side. So we're March 20th, 2024, and I want you to really reflect for a minute alone first. What needs to happen by March 20th, 2025, so 1 year from now, so that you feel satisfied with your progress. So if you're here at this workshop, chances are you're thinking about something. May not be a business, maybe something like a portfolio crew, maybe something that you want to do within the next year. I really want you to think about that, and I'll give you 1 minute to just reflect on that. Sorry, I can't turn music on. I usually like to do that, but reflect for 1 minute, and then I want you to share after. I'll let you know when to share. So just take 1 minute to reflect on that. But essentially, yeah, the book gives you a lot of the journey, the story, but also the 100 interviews that I did, like Alex Osterwalder and Ariana and all these folks. So there's lots of insights in there. The book did really well. The book actually helped me get my business from like 0 to 7 figures within 2 years. And that was unexpected, but like a lot of because of the personal branding and the platform building and the authenticity and all of the different things that I did. So, and for me, I just love helping other people be successful. I don't do as much speaking and all the things I used to do. I'm going to do that in a couple of years, but for the most part right now, I'm heads down focused on helping people like Glenn. I'm just really driven by helping other entrepreneurs succeed. So, and there's a promo code. You have to use Me2We as a promo code on that page. I'm also running, I actually just added the slide this morning because I thought some of you seem to be interested in professional speaking. I'm running a program this summer. It's a group program. And it's essentially for some of our existing clients and some new people who are really trying to understand how to break into the professional speaking industry. I recently did a webinar a few weeks ago. There's a replay you can access. I'm happy to share it with you on how do you actually become a paid speaker, professional speaker. There's a lot of stuff out there, and I want to cut through the noise and really help people who just really want the solid advice. Our keynote coach is actually Dr. Nick Morgan at Harvard, and he's coached, the founders of Impact 11. He's coached Sally Hogshead. He's coached some of the top speakers, and so there's going to be some great nuggets in that program through masterclasses, coaching, guest speakers. We have a database of thousands of speaking opportunities and conferences coming up. So there's lots in there. I'm probably going to run it one time because I'm hoping at Harvard, I'm going to get the strategy to scale my company, and then I probably won't offer it again. So I'm just really giving back this summer. Glenn will be part of it too. So you'll get more interaction with him too, and a lot of other amazing folks. So that's that on the Speaker Accelerator. And I have a LinkedIn newsletter I launched thanks to the Power Course this winter with Jeffrey Pfeffer, Professor Pfeffer. It made me take some action. It actually was very helpful for me because my course facilitator Monica was like, you got to, level up. And I was like, well, I've been trying to do this newsletter since like years ago. And so I took that next step. It's not perfect, but it's progress over perfection. And again, just go to market, try new things, iterate. And yeah, the newsletter has lots of different tools and advice on how do you build your authority. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much.